Today's Escape from Tarkov science video aims to shed some light on the reloading mechanics in the game and what they actually mean for you in combat. There's a ton of decisions we need to make at any given time, from choosing which magazines to take with you into a raid, how many of each you want to bring with you, which are the multiple reloading techniques to use, etc. Most of what we used to decide these things always felt a bit like old wives' tales. Nobody really had any hard data on what the differences were, what things actually mattered, and what factors we should really be taking into consideration when we're making the decisions when gearing up for a raid or in the middle of a heated firefight. So I gathered a ton of questions from my community on Twitch, and combined them with some ideas and theories that I personally had, and compiled them all here to hopefully help out the EFT community. Now speaking of, if you haven't already, you should come visit me while I'm streaming on Twitch just about every weeknight at 6 p.m. Eastern, and usually all day on the weekends. I think you'd be surprised at how much fun we have on my stream, and how it's one of the most unique streams on Twitch. Alright guys, so let's jump into it. Alright, so the first question that we have is, how much do the different reloading techniques affect weapon reload speed? Battlestate has done an amazingly impressive job building in several distinct reloading techniques into the game, keeping it as close to real life as possible. Now many new players don't know about these different mechanics, and even some experienced players aren't aware that you can reload some guns 5 or 6 different ways with varying levels of complexity and duration. As most of you know, pressing R with a weapon equipped and an available magazine either in your chest rig or pocket results in your player taking the current mag out of the gun, stashing it in the next available slot, and grabbing the next magazine to put into the gun. Now a normal reload is called a tactical reload if you reload when the current magazine has not yet been emptied. Now if you double tap R, you initiate what I'll call an emergency reload, which results in your character taking the current mag out of the gun, quickly throwing it or dropping it on the ground to make reloading the incoming magazine faster. Now in this case, you pay the price of a dropped mag for the benefit of a faster reload time. So the results of both actions can be further altered by the gun you're using and its current state. Now if the gun has been shot dry, meaning there's no bullet in the chamber at the time of reloading, you'll need to chamber a round after loading the incoming magazine, which adds time to both reloading techniques. Now some guns, such as the M4, RSAS, and FAL, have further differences affecting reload times. But based on the way these guns function, if the gun is shot dry without a loaded magazine, this causes the bolt to fall forward rather than be locked back, so you won't be able to simply smack the bolt release, chambering a round. Instead, you'll need to reach back, grab the charging handle, and manually cycle a round into the chamber, adding a decent amount of time to your reload. I'm actually amazed Battlestate went into this much detail on just one mechanic of the game. It's pretty fucking unreal. Alright, so I tested the reload times across a number of different guns with different magazine types, primarily focusing on assault rifles and DMRs. Now at some point in the future I might circle back to do additional testing with pistols, sniper rifles, and shotguns, but if you see the level of detail I went into here, you're going to realize how much time that actually would have taken me. So I limited these tests to the RSAS, M1, a few of the AK variants, the M4, the SA-58 or the FAL, the AS-VAL, and the SKS. Now to start, the least optimal reloading technique involves reloading the gun when you've fired your gun dry, meaning there's no more rounds in the magazine or in the chamber. Now on average, this took about 4 seconds, which is quite a long time if you think about it, as this technique involves taking the current mag out of the gun, placing it into your rig, grabbing the next mag and inserting it into the gun, and then manually chambering the first round. Now we can improve upon this in a few ways, the first one being the emergency reload. By doing an emergency reload instead of a normal reload, you'll end up dropping your mag on the ground, but you'll save yourself almost half a second on average. Now the time penalty for chambering a round as well as dropping a mag can both be avoided while still saving additional time by simply doing a normal reload but avoiding shooting your gun dry. Averaging just about 3 seconds, we're saving an entire 1 second on every reload by avoiding needing to chamber a round. Now your life is almost always worth more than the cost of a single magazine. So if you're really in a pinch and need to save as much time as possible, you can do so by doing an emergency reload when your gun still has a round in the chamber. By doing this, you'll gain the time savings benefit of both techniques, resulting in an average reload time of about 2.5 seconds, a full 1.5 seconds down from the first reload technique mentioned. Now if you're struggling and getting killed while reloading more often than not, consider using some of the different techniques I mentioned here to minimize the time spent doing your reload animations. For some perspective, take an average extended firefight with multiple targets where you'll reload, let's say, 3 times. If you do normal reloads and fire your gun dry every time, this will result in over 12 seconds watching reload animations. Now if you instead took some extra mags with you, did emergency reloads and made a conscious effort to avoid shooting your gun dry, you'll reduce that 12 seconds down to 8 seconds. Now how many times did you die to that last guy you were fighting because you were reloading? Consider how having that additional 4 seconds might have changed that fight in your favor. Alright, so question number 2 is, do different guns reload faster than others? So the short answer here is yes, they do. Now to provide some more useful presentation of the data I collected, check out this chart I put together comparing the reload times between various rifles. Now, as you can see, the M4 has the fastest reload time of about 2.5 seconds, compared to other rifles. The VAL, FAL, RSAS, and AK variants were all fairly close at around 3 seconds, and the SKS was again the major outlier here, taking a full 5.5 seconds to reload. The results were fairly similar when comparing the normal reload times for all of the rifles when they had an empty chamber. Now the M4, FAL, RSAS, and M1 had slight advantages, with reload times taking about 3.5 to 4 seconds, whereas the VAL, SKS, and other AK variants were just over 4 seconds. When doing emergency reloads by double tapping R and dropping the mag, the M4, FAL, and VAL all came in at or under about 2.5 seconds, with the other rifles not too far behind at just over 2.5 seconds. Note here again, because the SKS does not have an emergency reload option, it was omitted. At this point, we see unsurprising results when testing the emergency reload on an empty chamber, with one notable exception here being that in this case, the FAL was the fastest to reload with this technique. This is because it gains a slight animation advantage when dropping the magazine and activating the bolt release, so combining these end up slightly beating out the M4 for reload times. Now one more extremely interesting exception to this is again the SKS. If you happen to fire your gun dry and do a normal reload, it's actually faster than if you hadn't fired the gun dry by over 1 second. Because of this, the SKS is the only gun that I would actually recommend firing dry whenever possible, assuming that you're fast enough to realize that you're empty and reload quick enough. Now the RSAS, M4, and FAL are the 3 guns that I tested that have bolts that fall forward when the round is fired from the chamber but there's no magazine in the gun. Now reloading from this state requires that the new round be chambered manually using the charging handle, which requires more effort than simply slapping the bolt release, so naturally this process takes longer. So the M4A1, RSAS, and FAL are the 3 guns that I tested that have bolt release levers, which gives them an additional reload type as well as a slight advantage compared to the other guns. If any of these are fired dry when no magazine is in the gun, the bolt release lever cannot be used, so this requires grabbing the charging handle and manually chambering around, similar to guns like the AKs or the AS VAL. An interesting observation here was that the FAL was slightly faster than the other 2, seemingly due to the fact that the charging handle portion of the animation is faster by a couple tenths of a second. Now the M4 was actually the fastest to insert the new magazine, but because the charging handle is located towards the rear of the gun, it requires further reach than the RSAS, so the 2 take about the same amount of time to reload. Now I wasn't sure what the best way would be to compare all the different guns overall, so I opted to average all of the times for each gun so we could get an idea for the average reload times across all the various reload techniques. Now, I know this isn't exactly accurate as you're not equally likely to reload using each of the different techniques, but for now it's a close enough approximation. When it comes to reload speed, on average the M4A1 is going to be the fastest, with the SKS pulling up in the rear. Alright, so the next question here is if there's a notable difference between the different types of magazines. Is it actually worth spending the additional cash on some of the more expensive mag options? So regarding reloading the gun by taking one magazine out and inserting another magazine in its place, as opposed to reloading bullets into a magazine, I measured 0 difference between each of the mag options for any given gun. Now I was always under the impression that spending extra for the nicer mags would lead to an increased speed of reloading. The phrase load/unload speed modifier is ambiguous and in my opinion should be changed. I'm sure this was obvious to lots of people, but for me and a bunch of people in my community, it actually came as a surprise that this referred to packing and unpacking of bullets into the magazine as opposed to swapping magazines to and from a gun. As someone who tends to bring a bunch of extra magazines into raids, rather than 1 or 2 additional mags and a bunch of ammo, this is actually pretty significant, as that extra 5,000 or 6,000 rubles per raid can really add up. Alright, so the next question here is, does the amount of gear you're wearing or the ergonomics of the gun affect the speed of a reload? So if having lower ergonomics and being fully geared negatively affected reload speed, we should expect to see a drastic difference between 2 reloads if one was done with a heavily modded gun without any armor on, and the other was with a poorly modified gun with tons of gear equipped. So if I ended up seeing a difference here, I was going to break it down further to determine which changes were actually responsible, but both reloads were the exact same time. So it seems to me that it's safe to say that the other gear you have equipped, as well as the gun's ergonomics or attachments, do not affect reload time at all. Alright, the next question here is, how much do skills affect reload speed and the speed of loading bullets? So my main account is currently level 55, with level 17 assault rifle skill and a level 9 DMR skill, as well as a level 5 mag drill skill. Now, level 17, it states that my assault rifle reload speed should be 7% faster, and at level 9 DMR, it should be 4% faster. Now, I tested the accuracy of this by comparing reloading the same guns on my recently reset level 1 character. Now, I gathered a bunch of data here, and it was mostly consistent across the board, so I didn't want to waste a ton of time plotting all this stuff just to show you a million bars that looked about the same. So the increase in the AR reload time ended up being a bit more than 7%. Instead, it was closer to about 9%. Reloading the DMR did in fact increase by about 4%, as indicated on the skills page. Now, I'm not sure if the numbers that they have posted here are 100% accurate, or if they're, rounded, or estimates, or what. I'm sure this will improve as the development increases. I do think, however, that these percentages are nearly imperceptible. I have 829 DMR kills and nearly 3,000 assault rifle kills, and all I get in return is saving 0.3 of a second on my reloads. Maybe this is because coming from other games like Call of Duty, where you have a perk like Sleight of Hand that increases reload speeds anywhere from 30 to 50%, maybe my expectations are a bit unrealistic. But you'd think that killing 4,000 people, requiring at least as many reloads, would give your PMC enough practice to get a bit more than a few percent faster at reloading. When measuring loading and unloading the same mags on this account compared to my freshly reset level 1 account, I measured between a 3 and 5% increase in speed. Comparing the reload times for a 20-round M1 mag and a 60-round AK-74 mag between my level 1 and level 5 mag drill skills, you can see this saves somewhere between 1 and 3 seconds per magazine. Now, I'd be interested to know if you guys think this is significant, but honestly, given the amount of time it takes just to get the higher mag drill skill level, having such a small benefit seems like something I'll probably just ignore for now. I know there was a bug around this skill at one point, and maybe in the future they'll tune it so it's easier to level or the gains are more significant. Having already spent an astronomical amount of time gathering this data, I decided to skip comparing the speed and accuracy of checking mags. Honestly, this seems pretty boring and insignificant personally. But if anybody wants to do the testing on these values themselves, feel free to leave a comment with a comparison below, and I'm sure me and the community would appreciate it very much. Alright, so on to the next question. Is reloading without having a full slot available the same as an emergency reload? The quick answer is no. What ends up happening is the magazine is dropped on the ground, but it's done at the same speed as if you put it back into your rig, so you gain no benefit from having a full rig and doing a normal reload. So is it really faster to switch to a secondary weapon instead of reloading? Yes, this isn't just a Call of Duty meme. Whether it's another rifle or a pistol, it's noticeably faster to switch to a second gun than it is to reload your current one. I tested a bunch of different combinations, switching from one rifle to another rifle, a rifle to a pistol back to a rifle. They all took about 1.5 to 1 3/4 seconds to switch and fire off your first round. That means we're saving a full second or more compared to normal reloading. If you happen to run your gun dry, this becomes even more drastic, as switching guns can save you over 2 seconds. Is it worth it to bring a ton of extra mags with me? What if I'm just gonna drop them or die with them? How does this compare to taking fewer mags and bringing extra ammo in the protector case and reloading mid-raid? The real cost associated with taking a bunch of extra mags with you is the ammo rather than the magazines themselves. For example, buying 6 30-round AK mags is going to run you about 8,000 rubles, whereas buying enough BP ammo to fill those mags is going to cost you almost 50,000 rubles. Given that you can't insure ammo, if you die, you're going to be losing that money invested in that ammo if it's not in your protector case. So with the previous example, if you bring in a load of extra mags and you die, you're losing at least 50,000 rubles guaranteed, and worst case scenario, you also lose the 8k you invested in mags, for a total loss of 58,000 rubles. Yikes. So what many players still do, and what we all did back in the day before reload animations were a thing, was take 1 or 2 extra mags and a few stacks of ammo in our protector case and load them as needed. Again, with the previous example, in the same scenario, you'd end up losing 3 mags and the 90 rounds of BP inside them, which would total approximately 20,000 rubles. So let's say during a raid you end up needing all 240 rounds of that BP ammo. So ask yourself, is it worth the extra 38,000 rubles for you to not have to sit through reloading those 3 mags and being taken out of the fight for over a minute? Only you can answer that question for yourself. Personally, at this point in the patch where money is no longer an issue, and I don't really find loading mags the most riveting content for my stream, to me it's worth the additional cost. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed another Tarkov science video. I learned a ton making it, and I hope you learned something from it as well, even if that something was to confirm what you had already suspected before but didn't have any proof of. The amount of time, effort, planning, and work I put into these videos is not insignificant, so if you enjoyed it, all I ask is that you hit the like button, leave a comment below with your thoughts on the subject, and if you're feeling particularly generous, sub to the channel and share it with your friends. It'd also be pretty fucking rad if you guys came and hung out with me next time I'm streaming live on Twitch. My YouTube and Twitch channels are growing super fast, and I appreciate all the love and support so far. I'll see you guys all out there on the battlefield. Have a good one.